Well, how about that? We went to an event that's supposed to take place in about 2 weeks. We messed up. So, welcome everyone. I don't know. I guess it's my age. I should get my grandkids in here to help teach me how to run this stuff. What do you think, Daniel?
I didn't see which one you clicked. So
I clicked on our webinar that we're going to have on the 8th. But good morning, everyone. We're delighted you're here with us today. Just quickly, I know we kept some of you waiting there for a couple of minutes, but just want to announce a couple of things coming up, and then I'll turn the time over to Daniel to begin our presentation today. Today's event is about wealth transfer, legacy planning, pretty detailed stuff. We're going to try to dumb it down a bit, and as always, if you have questions, don't hesitate to get with us individually, and we can help you through the process.
Also the chat box.
Okay, the chat box. Daniel, tell them about the chat box.
Down in the corner of your screen, you can type a question or message to us, and we will respond as the presentation or at the end. So feel free to do that.
Okay, as far as upcoming events, on April 8th, Thursday the 8th, we're going to have an educational event entitled Risk Management. You can go to our website. That's where we're directing everybody now, sfamga.com. You go there and you can online register for our events, and you can look at the recordings of past events. They're all there too. There's links there. So Risk Management on April 8th. And we're having a double toking event, Bring a Friend to Natalia's and to Props on April 13th is the Natalia's double token event. You can start registering for that right now. And then the Props is 2 days later on the 15th in Mason Warner Robins at the Props restaurant. So you can come, bring a friend. We're going to be talking about retirement planning that night. And then on the 22nd of April, we'll have our annual shred party, food truck, like we did last year in the parking lot. We did the food truck, and we're going to bring that back again. We had well over 100 participants last year. So get your stuff together, come and shred it, and have a nice Mexican food truck meal and enjoy each other's company. So with that said, I'll turn the time over to Daniel. We'll begin our presentation today on wealth transfer and legacy planning.
Good morning, everyone. So what we're going to talk about today is not only about life insurance, but also how it's evolved over time and has become a very useful tool in legacy planning. And what we mean by legacy planning is, for many of our clients, there's going to be assets left over at the end of their life. And there's a case to be made that taxes are likely to be higher in the future. And one very efficient way to transfer wealth is through life insurance, because it is used properly, it's tax-free to the next generation. Also, there are living benefits and living benefits to life insurance, meaning during your life, you can also use life insurance to take money out tax-free if used properly. And it's structured in a certain way. It can be extremely beneficial, and we like it for its guarantees. We like to have as many guarantees as possible for our clients, and life insurance does a good job of providing that. So let's get started with how life insurance has evolved. I'm going to spend the first few minutes talking about how life insurance has evolved, and then Bill's going to give us some real life examples and scenarios about how this can be used and applied to your financial plan. So let's take a look for a minute at how life insurance has changed, not just from being protection, meaning protecting your family. If something happens to you, life insurance can provide a death benefit, which can give them money for income, but it has evolved over time into more of an investment. And so that's something that's happened in the last 30 years or so. So in the early 1980s and prior to that, the main type of insurance was term insurance. Term insurance is a specified amount of time. You can buy a 10-year term policy, 15, 20, and now they have 30-year term policies, which will give you a guaranteed death benefit if you pay the premium. But at the end of that term, there are no more benefits. Around 2 to 3% of term policies are all that's usually used, because people don't typically pass away during the term period. But they're a very inexpensive way to provide life insurance. But over time, Insurance companies saw the need to provide more than just the death benefit. So they started having living benefits. Living benefits, again, are things that you can use while you're alive. You can take income out for different reasons, even in the middle of a policy term, as long as you have cash value that has built up in there. So they can provide tax-deferred growth in the investment accounts now, tax-free distributions, very competitive returns. You can contribute a lot more to life policies now, even without making them MEC, which is a modified endowment contract. We won't get too much into that. But they provide a lot of different benefits, and that's evolved over time. So if we kind of compare life insurance and the different attributes that it has compared to whole life insurance, compared to IUL. IUL is Index Universal Life, and compare that to a 401k. This chart kind of shows all the different attributes that each of them have. So let's just take a few examples here. Whole life insurance. Whole life insurance is very straightforward. It pays a set interest rate that's set each policy year, and that can change, but it has contractual minimums. That provides tax-deferred growth for the money that you fund it with, but it doesn't have an investment portfolio to provide higher returns. Qualified 401k, it does provide tax-deferred growth, but the Index Universal Life provides tax-deferred growth and an investment portfolio, tax-free distributions. So the one we're going to focus on today is the far right, overfunded Index Universal Life. It provides the most growth opportunities with the guarantees associated with traditional whole life insurance. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, I think, and Bill agrees, that there is a tax time bomb approaching. There is a storm on the horizon, unfortunately. And what that storm is the tax environment. Taxes are very likely to be higher in the future than they are today. We've said it for years that taxes are on sale today compared to what they're likely to be in 5 years, 10 years down the road. We already know for next year there's proposals on the table to raise taxes. They're wanting to lift the corporate income tax rate from 21 to 28%. They want to raise individual income tax. They say on the wealthy, but really who they're targeting is middle-class families. That's where the tax base is. So there is an approaching storm. There are ways to navigate this, which is why we're talking about it. For many years, people did not believe that, they believed all swans were white, right? They thought things were going to always be like that. But then they went to Australia, I believe it was Australia, and they found a black swan. They didn't know they existed. Well, that's the same thing today we see with the tax environment. It's like a black swan. It's going to catch people off guard. They're going to be surprised when middle-class families are paying more for taxes. But we want to provide a pathway to try to minimize that risk. Let's take a look at top marginal tax rates throughout history. On the far left side of the chart, you can see during the 1940s and 50s, the top marginal rate was over 90%. Now, granted, there were more deductions, but the effective tax rate was still higher through that period of time. It began to come down in the 1960s. The top tax rate dropped down to a mere 70%, which is terrifying. If someone had to pay 70% of their income, how hard would they really work? It's a disincentive for industry and production, certainly. But in the early 1980s, when Reagan took office, the top bracket was still at 50%, and he was able to pressure Congress to lower the tax rate down to 39%. And you can see the lowest that it got to, the top rate, we're looking at the top rate, the lowest it got down to is 28% from 1988 to 1990. So those were 2 good years, 2 good years of low taxes. Since then, what's the trend done? It's trended upwards. So tax rates have been trending upwards, and they're likely to continue to do so. You can always hear people say, hey, rates used to be 90%. We're spoiling people today by keeping rates low, and there's a lot of pressure in Congress, especially from certain political parties, to raise taxes, and unfortunately that means on the middle class. I've said this before, there's around 550 billionaires in the country. You could take all their wealth and barely fund the government for 1 year. There's just not enough money at the very top to pay for all these programs. So they have to go after the middle class. Don't make any mistake about that. So the U.S. national debt is a major factor here in why taxes are likely to be raised. We've already talked about where tax rates are headed. Part of the pressure from that's coming from our national debt. The way economists look at the debt is debt compared to GDP, gross domestic product. If you look over the far right side of the chart, you can see that the debt to GDP ratio spiked in 2020. Due to the pandemic, our GDP went down and our spending went up. So we're over 121% debt to GDP ratio. Most economists feel that around 100% is sustainable. 100% debt to GDP ratio. The only thing that saved us from taxes being raised prior to this is our GDP has been high enough to keep up with the taxes, to keep up with the debt to GDP ratio. So I'm concerned about this, that tax rates are going to be pressured upward because we are spending like mad. We're spending money that we don't have. Politicians like to take on debt so they don't have to raise taxes, but eventually there will be enough pressure to have to raise taxes. Whenever countries are concerned that we won't be able to pay them back, we borrow money in the form of debt and issue government bonds to be able to fund our budget deficits. And it's likely that we will be pressured to raise taxes because of the fear of our inability to pay our debt in the future. So some of this has happened in just the last year. And even since this presentation was put together, now there's another several trillion added to this. They're wanting to do a $3 trillion overhaul for the infrastructure in the U.S. But last year alone, $2.4 trillion cost to the stimulus. $3 trillion will be 10% of our already existing debt. We're pushing $30 trillion now. So this is a major concern that the pressure will mount and eventually taxes are going to go up, I think, sooner than later. So I just answered my own question, but are taxes going up or down? My money is they're going up, unfortunately. So what can we do about it? Well, there's several things we can do about it. One of which is we can do Roth conversions, which is something we're advocates of. If you're able to convert an IRA to a Roth IRA and pay 15% or less in taxes, for most people that makes sense. Last year was a good year to do that because there was no required minimum distributions for those taking them. So that's one way to help reduce taxes is take money out of IRAs responsibly and move it over to Roth IRAs where it's tax-free. Another way is to overfund a life insurance policy, which we're going to get into in just a minute. For those of you that want to deep dive into this subject, there's a great book by a guy named David McKnight, and Ed Slott is an advocate of David McKnight. Ed Slott is known as the top tax planner in the country, CPA. He's been featured on PBS, public broadcasting, and many other things. But this book is a great in-depth dive into why taxes are likely to go up and the power of zero. What zero means is there are investments in the form of Index Universal Life where you can have zero losses, you're guaranteed against losses, and also zero taxes on the gains if they're taken out properly. So it's a good book. If anybody wants more information on that, we can get it for you. So we've been talking a little bit about how life insurance has progressed beyond just death benefits. This is the evolution and timeline of that. Prior to the 1950s, there was just term life. 1950s, whole life came around. Whole life pays 3 to 4% interest currently on its cash value. Then we had universal life, which is basically like whole life, but it can pay a little bit higher interest rate and it's more flexible. Then variable universal life in the 1980s was very popular, but unfortunately, many of those policies projected that interest rates would stay at those rates of 9 to 10%, and they did not. But in 1997, Index Universal Life came out, and the way that it works is that you have an investment account and a guaranteed death benefit, but your cash value in your investment account can grow without losses. There's guarantees against the losses. Now, living benefits are available on Universal Life, Whole Life. You can take money out during your life for living benefits on all of those. The only ones you can't have living benefits on is term life. And even now, there's some provisions for that. So let's talk about the power of an Index Universal Life for planning. IUL again stands for Index Universal Life. If you just look at, the bottom one first, the bottom line there, the S&P 500, you know there's years where the market goes up, there's years where the market goes down. So if you invested $100 and it went up 4%, you had $104. But then if we had a market crash like we've had 3 times since the year 2000 now, the market drops 39%, you're down to $63. You gain 27%, you're at 80. You gain another 11%, you're only at $88.60. The losses really hurt the gains. But what if we had something where we had no down years, right? So the Index Universal Life, this assumes that you have a maximum gain on it of 12.5%. So even if you can't earn more than 12.5%, you still would outperform the S&P without any losses. So you can see it's obvious that if we have a recession like in 2007 and 8, the market dropped 39%, but your account, which was at $104, stayed at $104. Whereas if you were invested directly into an ETF that tracked the S&P, you'd be down to 63. So the power of zero is evident, that if you can have an investment that has no down years, you end up much better off. And in this example, $100 became $129 over this period of time, 2006 to 2010. And the S&P, if you'd invested in an index that tracked that, or an investment that tracked that, you'd only have $88. So that shows right there very clearly that if you don't have any down years, you end up with more money. So even if we look back at history, the benefit of no down years, if we go all the way back to 1930 and look at the S&P 500, the average return is 6.33% per year. That's the average of the S&P from 1930 to 2014. So what if we had no negatives? So let's just say we only get 80% of the upside, which in these Index Universal Life policies, that's possible. If you take away the down years and only get 80% of the upside, you have a 9.3% return. So it outperforms just the index alone if we have no down years. So a very powerful tool there of indexing through the Universal Life policy. So there's a lot of different applications for life insurance. You can plan for your family. Obviously, a younger person needs to have life insurance. So if they pass away, their family has enough money to provide for their kids through college. You can also do college planning and take cash value out of life insurance through living benefits for college payments. Some people fund the purchase of a home with the cash value, pay for weddings, vacations. You really can use it like this if you do it properly and take the money out properly. So there's a lot of different applications for how this can work. Now, you have to be insurable. You have to have someone who's insurable if you're not, to be able to get life insurance. It's not available to everyone. And of course, you have to fit a specific, and it has to hit a specific need for you to have this. But there are a lot of different applications of this. All right, so I've given you some background on what the power of zero does and how we can use this. Bill's now going to give some examples of how we can use the power of Index Universal Life and life insurance to fund a legacy, to pass assets on, in addition to some of these things that I've mentioned.
Thank you, Dave. It's a pleasure to speak to our clients, even if we have to do it through Zoom. I look forward to having these back in person. Maybe we can do so by summertime. Hope everybody's well, and if you haven't got the COVID shot, you'll get it soon, and maybe that'll help us move along. I have some examples today that we put together on how you can utilize some of these instruments that we're talking about today to pass on a legacy for generations. I started thinking about this a few months ago about how what should mine look like, how should we be planning, and what kind of things we could offer our clients that might be beneficial to them. Daniel spoke a lot about taxes, and the big slap in the face came in December 2019 when we had some changes to IRAs and Roth IRAs and non-spousal continuation of those benefits. It was called, if you might remember, they called it the Secure Act, if you remember that, back in December of 2019, where they did away with the non-spousal stretch of IRAs and Roth IRAs. What that means is that if the individual's already started taking RMDs and passes away, then his family has to continue the RMDs as they always have, but now they have to exhaust the IRA over a 10-year period of time. The same is true for the Roth IRA. Although it's not taxable, that means they have to start withdrawing it at the death of the individual who owned it and have it exhausted within 10 years. So essentially, they did away with postponing taxes or giving a tax-free lifetime income for heirs. That concerns me because a lot of our clients are thinking ahead and thinking about how they might want to position their assets for their families, and now they have done away with the lifetime income. It's not going to happen using IRAs, traditional and or Roth, because it has to be done in 10 years. So if you think about that for a moment, if you have a son or a daughter and they inherit your IRA at your death, and they're in a six-figure income, combined in-household income, and now they have to pay out an IRA over 10 years, it can have a substantial tax impact on them. That's not the legacy probably any of us wants to have, is to give more money to the IRS. So it's either we're going to have to plan properly so it's not theirs, meaning the IRS, and it truly can be our family. I'm going to give you a couple of examples today. As Daniel said a moment ago, you can literally use these types of vehicles to teach savings. I'll give you an example of how you might could do that. College funding, home purchases, weddings. You can withdraw money in the form of loans out of these contracts to be able to create legacies or defer them to create even more income and legacies for the future. Now, if I could just figure out how you get this to next slide. Here we go. You always ask the question of why and when and who. Is there somebody in your family or yourself or who you might want to plan for? How might we do this? So the first scenario, I use the word UGMA. That's a gift of minors. You could use the word a college 529 plan. It doesn't matter. In some instances, some of our grandchildren or children even might have got scholarships, and you put aside money in UGMA account or even in a college savings plan, and they end up with a scholarship and don't spend all the money. Now, how can you utilize this money? Well, in this case, this is an illustration of how we can actually maybe show how we can use those funds to fund something different down the road. If we utilized, withdrew some money out of those funds, and again, if there's a 529 plan, it's taxable, but if we positioned it in a situation where you could fund a life insurance policy for that college grad and start putting some of that college money that he would have had into this life insurance policy, you can generate down the road some income, possibly as much in this case over 10 years. If we fund it with about $3,000 a year, somewhere in the neighborhood of about $3,000 a month could be had 10, 15 years down the road to fund things like maybe your grandchild now has a need of nursery care, nursing care, because they're working. They need to have them in a facility where they have the ability to take care of them, so your child and his spouse can work and not worry. So you could do a life policy on your son or daughter, fund it with the leftover monies that you were going to use for college, and sometime down the road, that child can have the ability to withdraw money for family needs, whether it be funding for care for the grandchildren, or supplemental income, or continue to grow for a life estate for them. So that's one example. In this example here, you have grandchildren being born. Well, my wife and we're blessed with a bunch of them. So we've got 22 grandchildren and one great grandchild, so I don't know how I could possibly fund all this for them. But this is an example where you can use the life of a grandchild to create multiple opportunities for that child in his future. So let's just say the gifting laws now are $15,000. If you're not using all of your IRA or all of your RMD you have to take out of it, you can gift up to $15,000, and that doesn't affect you tax-wise. You don't get a tax break for it, but you could put something like that away into a life policy. Yes, a child can have a life policy. You could go back and say, well, I could let him have my Roth. Well, we know that he has to have that over a 10-year period of time, and he will be quite young probably and not know what to do with that money. So you could do it with a Roth. You can do that the day he's born, put that aside and say this is going to be for him, or you can put one of these tax planning and legacy planning life insurance policies on that young man or that young lady at birth, begin to fund it, and over their lifetime, you can fund multiple grandchildren if you have the assets to do so. But this is an example of how you can fund 3 of your grandchildren. If you funded it at $10,000 a piece a year, in this case, it's an example of 10, 10, 10. It can be any example you want. That's the death benefit. There's going to be a death benefit. There has to be a reason to put that kind of life insurance on a child. So every insurance company is going to ask that question. But what's substantially equal of all those 3 grandkids is what we're funding for here is a college education. So if we funded it at $10,000 at birth until they went to college at age 20, they could withdraw somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 for college education, each of them. So that's an example you could look at. You can put it on their life. You can put it on the parents' life. You can do multiple things with it. But that would be a way to fund a tax-free college education, utilizing money that you're probably not going to use, excess R&D money that you're accumulating over time. So that's an excellent example. Pardon me? Yeah, and the policy is still in force once they take that. We're not going to take more money out than needed, so the policy is still in force and will continue to accumulate money. And if it's continuing to be funded past the 20 years or 30 plus years, that it's going to continue to grow and can be that 40,000 can then be a lifetime income for somebody down the road. Scenario number 3, this is a multi-way to plan. Now, this is a quick example of Sam and Janet here. They're not married. They're life partners. They choose not to marry. They've both been married before. He's in love with her. He wants to protect her. Obviously, he has 3 children, adult children. And he's also concerned about life insurance. If he passes away, so that Janet gets something, his children get something, and he's also concerned about long-term care. So you can actually build all those living benefits into this scenario. This is a lengthy scenario. I'm just going to highlight a little bit. You can look at a term policy, a 20-year term policy on Sam. You could invest money that he gets from a rental income, in this instance, in an S&P 500 fund. You could buy a long-term care policy. So there's lots of options. So let's look at a solution. So the questions are, who do you insure and what do you insure? You insure all 3 kids or just on Sam, or do you leverage everything? In this case, what we're going to do is not fund anything with Sam, but we're going to go right to the children. So we have a 21-year-old daughter. We're going to fund her a $5,000 annual premium coming out of the cash flow he has from rental property and other investments. We're going to get a total death benefit of about $700,000 by doing all 3 children and Sam. We do Sam and Janet so that they can have a long-term care policy here, so they can take living benefits out of that. So we're going to fund it for $15,000. That's the total amount of money we're going to fund it for. And then, as you can see, during Sam and Janet's lifetime, they have a lifetime income benefit of $18,000 for either or of them. They got living benefits of $183,000. That would be for the long-term care benefit. And the children over here, as these things grow over time, look at the death benefits on each of the children, and then look at the income that they can generate in their lifetime when this thing gets out about 30 or 40 years. You're talking about $45,000, $48,000, in the neighborhood of $45,000 to $48,000 over their lifetime. So all those benefits are included within this one investment type of a vehicle called Index Universal Life. So each of the children have been funded, and he's taking care of himself and his lifelong partner as far as long-term care, and a death benefit her in the event of his death, all in one planning session. In essence of time, just long-term care standalone for your parents, for you and I, for you and your spouse rather. You can do that with life insurance. We've talked about that numerous times in our presentations in the past. The only issue with that, generally for most of us, as we age, we got to qualify for it, and we may not be able to qualify for it. But you can utilize the child by owning the policy, putting a life on them, and you owning the policy, you're entitled to the benefits of the policy in the form of loans. So there's ways to make this thing happen. So my question is always, can I do something better for my situation personally and for my life right now? And is there a way that we can maybe have a legacy with our assets that last generations, not just to our children, but to our grandchildren and great-grandchildren? So when we look at this subject matter, it's a very broad, long subject of ways and things that we can do. And we've tried to, over the last 6 months, involve ourselves in learning how we can possibly approach this with some real-life examples and opportunities to have discussions with our clients and their family members about what do you want your future to look like? I mean, how do you want your assets to go to your family? We do know and do subscribe to the fact that you need to take care of yourself first. But if you have any desire whatsoever to do some planning beyond yourselves, then we certainly have opportunities for you to do so. So, Daniel, do we have any questions we need to address?
Let's see. I've got a question here. It's more for a specific situation. A lot of times these types of solutions depend upon your individual circumstance. So if you heard something today that you think may be applicable to you, which a lot of people it should be, please give us a call or message on here that you'd like us to set up a phone call to start a preliminary discussion about this. I don't really see any others on there.
Yeah, this may not be for everyone on the call, but it could be for your children or grandchildren. You know, I have learned that there's different ways out there to accomplish a task that we're trying to do. If we can identify what that task is, we can learn ways to make it happen for us. So if you have questions, give us a call. We intend to spend a lot more time with this in the future because we have an aging client base, and we want to be able to help them help their family and create legacies if that's their desire. We thank you very much for attending today. God bless, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the near future. Don't forget about the upcoming client events. Bring a friend to Natalia's and to Props in April, and they'll come by and drop off all your junk. And then in the latter part of April, again, that date was the last Thursday of the month, whatever that date is. Look forward to seeing you then. Thanks so much for participating today.
If you want to, in the next few days, mention Shayla, what's going on, and I'll talk with her and see, fill her out, see what she wants for all the day and that kind of thing, sometime in the next week or so. But I'm going to do it until you tell me you told her.
Well, she's going to be here in a little while. I'll chat with her. But you make an appointment with one of us to go over your particular situation.
We'll see.